When it comes to working with camera in Maya, most people are very familiar, of course, with working in the perspective view or a new camera view, just moving around naturally. It's actually a very intuitive way to work. This is a great way to set up shots that are going to be still, but often you'll find when you're doing anything more than just a simple tilt or pan or simple dolly, in Maya this isn't enough, that ultimately you don't get the control that you need to make this work. When it comes to live action, we're very used to seeing machines like these dolly carts that ultimately allow very complex moves in a very controlled manner on multiple axes. You can see basically it's splitting out the different movements of the camera, this boom or pedestal, crane shot here versus a rotation here versus movement of the entire cart. You can get very, very complex movements this way. In Maya, it's really no different. However, if you're, in terms of what you want to try to get for a shot, the difference here is that this camera, the default camera, doesn't do these things very naturally, and certainly doesn't do them well when you start to combine compound moves, a boom plus a pan at the same time. So when we're looking at more complex moves in Maya, we can take a note from the page of live action and try to work with a similar system, which is what I'm going to show you today. This will also allow you, also be showing you how to use the graph editor to get more control over your curves. Animating a camera move in anywhere, in Maya, in stop motion, or in live action is an art form in and of itself. You can't understate the importance of the camera in a production. That's how we understand the emotional content of the scene, the mood of the scene. There's so much that goes into there. In there, you really have to take it all into account and give it its due attention. So in this case, we're going to be looking at recreating this shot here. This is from just a test production. And again, I'm not claiming this is anything amazing, but there's actually more going on here than meets the eye, and not something you can really do with a typical Maya camera. So we're just doing a simple tracking shot with a boom and a pan, so actually not simple. We got 3 moves all at the same time. Before we jump into this, let's take a second and look at what the different camera moves are. When I'm working with students, I typically find that everyone just uses the word pan for anything the camera does. This is completely inaccurate, and if you're working on a team, could really cause errors in communication if you're directing a shot or if a director is talking to you about what they expect to have happen. So this is an image I grabbed from the SketchUp forum, so I did not make this, but it gives a really nice quick sense of what the camera can do. It doesn't list the names, but I'll tell you those as we go through it really quickly. On top we see the camera translating, and on the bottom we can see the camera rotating. It's an easy way to sort of separate the different things the camera can do, and ultimately it's a good way to think about your actual shots in terms of camera moves versus camera rotation or combinations thereof, and they all give a different feel to the shot that communicates something different. And over time, as you get used to them, you'll understand when to use which one and how you'd like to play with your actual shot to communicate what's important in that moment. So on the top we have, well actually let's identify the pan first, since everyone says pan for every one of these moves, which is completely inaccurate, and again will cause confusion in the middle of a crew. This one here, number 4, is an actual pan. It's a rotation where the camera is stationary and rotates left and right. This is different than over here on the upper right, a translation left to right, which is a tracking move, but doesn't include any rotation. So so in a tracking move, our relative position to our focus, if it's moving with us, and the background stays constant, whereas in a pan, we're constantly shifting our perspective on the space. Up here on the top, we have the dolly, which is pushing in or pulling back from the subject matter. This is different than a zoom. A zoom is using just the lens to push in and push out, and is a very flat move. So essentially enlarging it or making it smaller within the camera. But a dolly actually changes our position within the environment, within the space, and creates a much deeper sense of space. This move has a lot of different names depending on who you're talking to. It can be called a boom, a crane, a pedestal. A crane, to be fair, can be called a lot of different things, but this is definitely not a pan, an up and down shot. Notice with this one, you maintain your relative horizontal positioning relative to your subject matter versus a tilt down here, which actually makes you seem smaller or larger than your subject matter as you tilt up or down. This one down here on the bottom right has a bunch of different names too, depending on who you're talking to. This could be called a roll, bank, or rack, although I'd say roll is by far the most common term. And rack, it can get confusing since we typically use that to refer to a focus change, a rack focus. So, and this is not as commonly used, but definitely something you want to be aware of as one of the potential moves that we have in camera. So again, from the upper left, we have dolly in and out. We have pedestal, boom, or crane. I'm going to use boom. Up here in the upper right, by the way, this is tracking. People also call this a truck. It's very, very common and totally acceptable. Maybe even more common than track. And then pan, tilt, and then we're going to use the word roll for this one. So it's just important to keep that in mind as you talk to your crew, what's actually happening here as we look at the shot. It makes more sense when you think about begins with a truck and a boom as we move down, but you can also see that rotation in there, which is the pan, with no tilt. So we're kind of keeping our camera level for the majority of this shot, maybe a little bit of tilt right here towards the end. So we actually have 4 moves all in one with this one simple shot. That ultimately, if it's done right, you probably wouldn't even think about all those things. You're just really focused on the scene. That's what we're aiming for, but still imparting that sense of mood with the speed of the camera and the movement of the camera itself. So let's talk about how to actually do this with a camera in Maya. Right, again, if you just use the typical perspective camera, if I were to make a new camera here, you'll find that as soon as you start to do one move, it affects the other one. You start to get this more of the roller coaster effect of the camera kind of zooming all over the scene, which is very disconcerting in most situations where you want to not be aware of the camera. You just want it to feed into the audience's perceptions of what's actually happening. So what I'm going to do here, I'll show how to make it, but I'm also going to I'll show how to make this at the end. But I'm just going to bring in here what we typically call in Maya a 3-node camera. Now it's kind of representative of what we typically see with a full-on live-action dolly cart. You certainly don't need all this stuff on here to make this work. This is more for people first starting out to get a sense of what's going on, remind them of the names that we're going to be using here. So here we can see, if I grab this lower control, we have a dolly in and out. We have the truck left to right. If we click on this one here, we're going to have a pan and a tilt that work together. And then finally the roll, should you need it. Now it's a good idea when you're doing these things, when you're trying to set up a camera, to set it up, no matter whether you're doing it with this 3-node camera or you're doing it with just a basic Maya camera, to plan on doing a lot of your positioning of the camera through a perspective view, as opposed to what we're used to, which is ultimately looking through the camera. In this case, you'll see that functionality is actually locked off. We can't do anything with it. I've done that on purpose to make sure we don't make any mistakes. So the best way, again, to position this is to actually look through the camera in one view as you're moving it in this other view. If you're just in this view, like a typical perspective view like this, trying to get precise control is very difficult, like trying to get just on the ground plane and then tilt at the same time. It just becomes very frustrating to get the level of control you need when you're trying to do a film. And in this case, it's very easy to do it, even though it's not as intuitive, to get exactly the level of control you need when you're working with a system like this. So here I can put the camera right on the ground, I can rotate it towards my focus, and then very easily grab my pan tilt and tilt up exactly where I need, and or pan exactly the way I want, and still maintain my axes. And that's really the advantage of a system like this. So if you watch the finished camera here through the perspective view, so this is over here, you can start to see how this is working off the same system that we typically see in live action. So here we can see the boom, you can see the pan, and a little bit of the tilt at the same time as the camera comes into place. And actually, it's funny, I thought there was a truck in here, but it looks like that was entirely a pan as it just dropped down into the scene. So actually, we'll put this one down here. So it gives you very precise control over composition and movement through the whole shot. And as we'll see in just a few minutes, it also gives you precise control over the graph editor. You'll find that if you do a direct complex or compound movement on a simple camera, that you'll end up having very difficult time trying to control the separate parts of the graph. So let's go ahead and try to recreate this movement using this control here. So I'm going to hide this guy for the moment. That did not work. Oh, my visibility is locked. Let me unlock that and then hide this guy so we don't get confused. So the first thing, this is our actual shot over here. The first thing we want to do is get ourselves a frame. Without a frame, you can't really tell. There's no way to tell what you're actually going to see in this shot. So I'm going to go ahead and go to View. So we're getting a little error there. Sorry, it looks like I was having trouble with the namespace. Did not like an underscore to start it off. So in this case, when you're working with this type of camera, any 3-node camera, what you want to do is use the first node. In this case, it's going to be the Dolly truck node, to go ahead and position the camera where you want in space. So in this case, our initial shot, looking at our storyboards, it's actually not by Brad Bird, just so you know. In this shot, we're going to start up here with a view on the sun, as we saw before, and we're going to move our way down here. I always recommend working off of your boards when you're creating your animatics or when you're creating your actual film, so that you're focused more on what the composition is supposed to be, what actually serves a story, and not just getting lost in 3D space here. So this is actually what serves a story. So again, starting off looking at the sun and then moving down to our little house in the mountains. So I can go ahead and position my, I know I'm going to want to end up with this fountain somewhat in the view, so I'm going to kind of position back there a little bit, and then go up here. I'm going to move my way up to the sun. So you can see the sun's way over there. The only way I'm going to get that, and I want this to definitely move down in the scene and kind of gives us the sense of actually kind of settling into the scene, which I like. So I'm going to start up probably about this height, and then use my pan tilt. And actually made this for this one just for fun. I'll add a little bit of a truck in there as well. But most of this is going to be through a pan and tilt. So I will now move over to the sun and then compose the look I like, whether it's going to be high or low. Obviously we're losing a bit of our ground over here, but that's something I can fix later. For right now, this is fine. So let's say this is my starting position. I'm just going to grab all my nodes here and press S on the first frame. So that keys my position in here. And I'll go ahead and just set up my second. Now, often I find with compound moves, you don't just get this on your first pass. It takes a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and set a, we'll make this happen over about 5 seconds. So we're looking at somewhere around the neighborhood of 120 frames here. I'm not worried about being precise right now. So I'll go ahead and move my dolly back into the scene. And again, every time I'm moving this, I'm checking over here in my viewport to see what I'm actually getting. I'm just watching it over there, which again is going to feel really clunky and unintuitive if you've never done this before. But in the end, your payoff is going to be a huge amount of control over your shot that you haven't had before, especially when it comes to going in there and playing with that graph. So still want a bit of that sky in there, maybe a little bit more pan. But I want some of the fountain too. And again, you'll see the level of control you get by working in one view and then looking at the results in the next view are going to be much better than when you've ever had if you've never done this before. So that fountain's going to be really important coming up. So let's go ahead and try this. I'm going to go ahead and key everything in my new position. And you'll find that it's probably not exactly what you expected when you first play it back, but you shouldn't get any weird rolling, none of that roller coaster camera action that you typically get when you're not doing it this way. Let's go ahead and press play. Which is surprisingly good. That's really good. It never works out that well. So I just want to show you a few things you can do to start playing with this from here. So obviously it's easy to change our timing in the graph editor. I kind of like the time. It's a little bit fast for what I was thinking. So let's go ahead and go back here and slow this down a little bit. I'm going to grab all my keys. I'm going to pull up my graph editor. I'm just going to push this window over here, and then in my panels I'll just choose the panel down here. I'll choose a graph editor. There we go. And I'll save the current layout over here. Two panel graph. So I can just go back to it easily. There we go. Of course it did not save my actual camera. That's too bad. Oh, that was actually my mistake. After you save one over here, right click and choose Save Current Layout. You then need to actually place the button here. So I'll choose right click and then choose the actual new one. So two panel graph. There we go. So now I should be able to pop back and forth between the ones I actually want to use. All right, so I'm going to grab all these. I'm in here, just going to change my timing a little bit. Pull this out to about 140. Now the nice thing here is because we can separate out the pan, tilt, the roll, and the dolly, we have explicit control over each one of these, which is much better than what you normally have in one camera. Now in one camera you do have explicit control over each rotation and translation, but you're often finding that as you change one, it affects the next one. And these ones are all separated, so you'll get much better control than you otherwise would. I'm also going to, I want this to be an establishing shot, or is an establishing shot. So with that in mind, I'm going to want a nice ease in and ease out on all my curves. So I'm going to choose the flat, select my tangents here at the beginning and end, hit flat, and this will give me a nice ease and ease out. We'll see a little bit more of a smoother start as we kick off, and then a smoother finish at the end. Now you can see the end stops, it still feels like it stops pretty abruptly. This is where getting to play with the graph really makes a big difference. So let's go ahead, and you might like this type of feel, but a lot of times in an establishing shot you want things to be quite a bit smoother. So here I'm going to grab actually all my controls and do my first pass all together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ease and ease out. I'm just going to do this on one so you can see it, but then I'll apply it to everything. So let's see here. Let's do it on this guy. So right now my ease in is pretty fast, which actually feels pretty good, but my ease out is really short and you can feel it. So here if I were to grab my tangent, if you don't have weighted tangents turned on, you need to turn that on. Over here under curves, we'll choose weighted tangents. And now I can grab this guy, my handle here, and pull it out. And as I pull it out, it makes this ease out much longer. Now it's going to change the speed in the middle of the shot. You'll feel it. It's going to start out slow, go much faster through the middle, so it has more time, and the amount of time I gave it to ease out at the end. In this case, it's going to be easier for me to do this to all these at the same time. So I'm going to grab all of them, grab these here. Again, on my curves, choose weighted tangents. And then I'm going to pull this out for a longer ease out at the end. Or ease in. I know everyone does it a little bit differently. Or maybe I just do. So here we'll see it's a little bit faster now through the middle, but we should have a nice ease in to the final part there. If you want more, keep playing with it until you get the feel that you're looking for. Again, you'll keep seeing the farther I go this way with this ease out here. I'm going to say ease out for finishing the move and ease in for starting the move. So here, again, you'll see it speeds up through the middle. This nice, long, slow finish. Okay, and you can keep playing with this until you get the exact feel you want. You'll probably find at some point, as you start to speed up in the middle, we're going to need to extend this out even longer than we originally intended. So, we have a happy kid in the background. So we're getting closer to the feel that I'm looking for. But now what I want to show you is where this camera really comes into its own, which is now you can start to play with different parts of the move. So let's say maybe I want to stay on the sun a little bit longer and have the pan come towards the end of the shot, which is probably kind of weird, but it'll be fine for at least our demonstration purposes. So here, I'm going to grab our pan. And for this one, I'm actually going to put a new key in here, but just on the pan tilt. So over here, we're going to have this still pointed back at the sun. Just going to throw a key in here. This is going to really mess up my curves here, which means I'm going to have to go take and adjust this out to create this to be a little bit, make this a little bit smoother. This one will change into a spline, so a little bit smoother action. So we'll stay in the sun a little bit longer. Let's say it's a really hot day. That's really important that we kind of have that feel that we're moving away from it. There we go, it's a little bit better. So we kind of maintain the sense the sun is really important here in this film, or in this moment. So here, let's see how this feels different. So we're pulling away from it, and then the pan's going to be much faster as we come over. Okay, so again, just a different feel to it. May or not be what you want, but again, the level of control you have there is what's important. Maybe instead you'd want to do the opposite. You know, for that, again, very simple. We do the same thing. In this case, we'd take the pan and we get it over to the house a little bit sooner instead. And actually, I'll do the tilt too. So this will actually add a tilt as the camera drops, which should actually be kind of nice, even a more sense of settling into the scene. So one more time. Just moving away from this pretty quickly. And a more pronounced sense of that tilt as we settle into this space. So every change you make becomes a very dramatic difference here. And it gets, the main thing here is just getting that level of control. Now let's talk really quickly about that 3-node camera. So how would you get a hold of this? I'm happy to put it down in the description so you can download it if it allows me to. But you can also make one of these really easily yourself. I'm going to show you that really quick. So this is less complicated than it looks. Again, the reason why I put these in here is just for people first starting out to get a sense of the terminology and also be able to quickly and easily think about the separation of control and what it's doing. So to make one of these yourself, we call this a 3-node camera. If you look over here in my outliner, you'll see the basic setup. So this is just the text. I'll delete this for right now so we don't get confused. The bottom node, the bottom node is just the camera itself, the one we usually kind of move through, or moving through the scene with. The next step up, I have this circle, which is just a group above this. Then we have a dolly, and then something just to grab the whole shebang and move it around with. So you'll notice for each one of these different levels of control, if I click on the camera or the roll, you'll see the only thing we have access to is just this rotation right here. Everything else is locked off. This is a good practice to use. It's really easy when you're in the camera just to fall back into old habits, grab and try to tumble and move through the scene like you normally would. You can't do that though if you lock all these things off, which is good. The pan and tilt just has the X and Y available. X and Y. And then the camera dolly actually has everything except for scale available. So we can translate and rotate. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why would that make sense? Isn't a dolly just back and forth and a truck just left and right? The answer is yes, but if you want to do a dolly in a different direction, for example this direction, you want to be able to rotate and translate at the same time. So that top node has all translates and rotates available. How do you make one of these? It's actually super simple. So without all this extra controls on there. So if I just go to create camera, we'll call this camera 2. Now ideally we wouldn't want to have any translates or rotates on here. I'd usually make it just in the center of the world like this one was made, but it's fine. I'm not sure if you can freeze transformations in the camera. That makes me a little nervous. No, it doesn't let me. Not surprising. So all I need to do to make a camera is we're going to group it to itself 2 times. 1, 2, which gives us the camera, and then 2 groups above it. The camera, like before, is going to be the roll. If you don't like having the camera be named roll, you could always add an extra group in here and make that the roll. In fact, here, I'll just do it. So we'll call this camera 3-node, or 3-nod. There. We'll make the group above it the roll. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong buttons here. The group above it, the tilt pan. Don't use a slash in there, it can't read it. And then we'll do Dolly truck for the top. And again, it's kind of nice if you, it's kind of weird to see Dolly truck in your outliner. If you call this 3-node camera at the top, then we know what we're looking at here. Don't we do a 3 at the beginning? It does not. All right. So 3-node camera. So in this case, if we're going to do the bottom node, leave it open so you can actually name the camera, camera 10, whatever. In this case, you'd want to lock off that entire camera so you don't accidentally move it when you don't mean to. That would mess this whole system up. The next part up, now we need to go ahead and center the pivot. So I'll just do modify center pivot. If you want to just a little bit, okay, cool, it centers it right at the lens. I'd personally prefer it to be right in the middle of the lens. In fact, you kind of need it to be. Let's see what this looks like. Just really quick if I'm looking through the camera. So this is, I didn't realize this before. This is actually pretty annoying. When you choose roll and you center pivot, what you end up getting is the pivot point at the top of the lens, which is bad. As you rotate, you see you're not actually doing a real roll. It's kind of creating a weird angle here. A true roll would happen right in the middle of the lens, which I'm going to try to do visually here. And now as I roll, you'll see it actually maintains the lens almost in the middle. I'm still not quite right. Wow. That seems to be a major oversight, in my opinion, for Maya to have done. I don't know why they would do that. Same way up the line as I center the pivot in each one of these groups, you'd want the pivot to be as close to the middle of that lens as possible. For each one of these. So for each one of these, I'll center that pivot and slide it down to the middle of the lens, because that's where all these should be operating from. For the final one, I'll be consistent. So again, here we have our roll, our tilt pan, our dolly, and our truck. So here, sorry this is confusing, we're looking, it's one camera looking at the next one. So here, tilt, pan, and then dolly truck, of course, be the whole move, both the truck and the dolly, and the ability to rotate too. So let's go ahead and then the last step you need to do here for each one of these. And again, if you do it right, each one of these should be zeroed out. You want, there we go. Put this back to where it started. There we go. So I just go through each one of these and lock off the controls that shouldn't be used. So here it would be actually almost easier just to select all these attributes. Notice I select the attributes, not the numbers. Right click, choose lock, and then unlock the Z. So that should be our roll. I like to check each one as I do it to make sure I didn't make a mistake. It's very easy to do. This will be everything but the X and Y. There we go. Just holding control to select the ones you want. Lock. The dolly truck is everything but the scales visibility. And then the 3-node top is just ultimately a way to make it look nice in the outliner. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and lock everything off so I don't accidentally use it, but I will leave the visibility available, so if I need to hide this thing, I can. So this is, in the end, the exact same thing we have over here, just not as fancy, without the text, without the extra boxes, but it's the same thing. The one nice thing about this system is that while you're in this view, it's easy to select everything, just grab it directly. In this system, to grab things, you need to select the camera and then use the up arrow key or down arrow key to move your way through the hierarchy. As long as you name things nicely, you can tell what's what over here, but it's a little bit less intuitive, but easy enough to make without all this extra stuff. So there you go. That is how you do a compound move in Maya. You can also add as many nodes as you want to if you get to be even a more complex move, but this should take care of 99% of the situations that you have to deal with. One last note as I wrap this up is I just want to reiterate, if you're just doing a basic camera shot, our basic camera, this is not necessary at all. It's obviously far more intuitive to go ahead and just position it within using the actual camera frame the way you normally would in a perspective view. So again, going back to my shot here. So it is hard to beat the simplicity and functionality of just going ahead and moving around your scene like this to set up a still shot. And for a simple shot, like if you're just going to do one move, so it's not compound, so if all I want to do here is just do a simple tilt like this, this is totally fine just to go ahead and do this in this view. I can easily just set my keys up. And the thing here is I'm just going to be working off of one axis at a time. So here, here, done. And because you're only working off of one axis at a time, you'll find the graph is really easy to work with and manipulate just like you would in any other situation where you're animating. So as soon as you add multiple moves to here, if I were to do a pan at the same time, here's where you're going to start to find out that you're getting weird stuff. Like here now you can see my whole world is off axis. That's not the shot I was actually looking to get. You get lots of weird rotations. You get more of that roller coaster effect. So that's where the 3-node camera comes into play when you're doing those compound moves. Hope that was helpful to you and that you can use it and that ultimately your films become stronger for it. Good luck.